What about the parking? You've been involved in some of those
Yeah, that's more
discussions as well.
that's more Bruce's baby than mine. I mean, my big concern is that the hub of the island is no longer the airport. I believe that the hub of the island has shifted, at least this time of year, to Straight Wharf. That the majority of the workers now
Certainly,
commute by.
that's certainly true as far as the airport's concerned,
Right.
and it's true because the steamship fast ferry doesn't run now.
Exactly, and we don't. But we have this beautiful airport with all this parking for these commuters that aren't using this parking. So now they're flooding the streets downtown, especially in the wintertime. We voted to allow overnight parking in the town lot, so a lot of them are going in there now, so that's helping. But all you have to do is drive downtown and go through the A&P parking lot or the Stop and Shop parking lot now on a Saturday or Sunday, and that parking lot's full. And it's not just filled with commuters, it's filled with families whose kids play hockey or swim or whatever, and they're gone off for the day to play, due to the sports. So we need to come up with some type of either satellite parking or something that people can park in and get downtown to utilize these ferries and such. I thought that the valet parking at the electric company worked really well this year. I think it'll be even better next year. I know a lot of my customers in the charter business used it because if we're on a half-day charter, it's a 5-hour charter, and there's no place to park in town for 5 hours, where they could go in there and pay the $25 and park. So it worked out great for them.
And they couldn't use the town lot unless they got there really early.
Exactly. If it's a morning trip, it's never a problem. But that noon charter that we leave on that gets back at 5, that's always difficult. And, I wouldn't be surprised if you don't start seeing businesses downtown start to validate parking in that parking lot. Because if you got somebody that's come in and they've spent a lot of money in your store and they came in because they were able to park in that valet, why wouldn't you want to valet it? Why wouldn't you want to validate it? So,
do you think the idea of a parking garage is dead?
I don't know. It all depends on what happens. The only place a parking garage could possibly go would be in that Wilkes Square property, and until the electric company decides what they want to do with that, I think it's, for all intents and purposes right now, it's not feasible. We're not going to do that in the town lot. Man, I don't think.
Is there anything new on your agenda for a second term?
No, I wouldn't say anything new. I spent a lot of time, it seems like, putting out fires. So, my main 2 reasons that I wanted to run again was to get the sewer stuff finished, at least on its track, and to come up with a long-range plan and hopefully get some of these buildings done for the office, for the space needs. I really, I'm really trying to concentrate right now on the fire station, and I get very concerned about the fire station because it is in pretty tough shape. I mean, it was built back in the 70s when we had a year-round population of probably about 3,500. Now we have a year-round population of almost 10,000.
More than that.
More than that if you go to by the dump numbers.
Yeah, right.
And it's inadequate, and the building's falling down. And we're still looking at the possibility of expanding on that site. The problem is that we could do it, and we could probably get away with it for 5 or 10 years, but then we still run out of space. So if we're going to spend all this money to renovate a building, wouldn't you want a building that would take you out 20 to 25 years? So that's what we're looking at now. But I want to get that done, and at least the money appropriated hopefully in the next 3 years so that it can be built. And the school's going to be coming in probably next year or the year after at the latest for a big appropriation for a new elementary school, and we're going to have the sewer issues. So there's going to be a lot of capital expenditure requests here in the next few years, and I worry that the fire station's going to fall through the cracks. So that's my big push right now, is to get
One of the
done.
other issues is that the town, like many municipalities, Nantucket isn't alone in this, doesn't do a very good job of maintaining what it has.
Yeah, and now that we have a facilities manager, I'm hoping that that's all going to change. I think that we've discussed this almost in every budget that I want to start to see a maintenance budget in there. And it's not just the town. It's amazing to me. I sit on the CPC, and it's amazing to me how many of these non-for-profits that come in and request funding. When you say, well, where's your maintenance budget?
Right.
They don't have one.
That's right.
They're just going from year to year and hoping nothing breaks. So
Right. So it's the same situation.
Right.
It's not just the town, but it is an issue, and it
Yeah,
can
like
save a lot of money
the
over time if that maintenance was done properly.
The CPC approved an application that's going to town meeting this year for a grant for the hatchery down in Brand Point, and then we were able to take a substantial amount of free cash and put that towards that renovation as well. So hopefully by next year that building will be up to speed, because you know that's a very important building to the waterfront, and
It's important for two reasons. That's iconic.
it is. When you come around Brand Point, it's the
Considering
first
how
building
long,
you see.
It hasn't been there all that long. It's
No.
become iconic, and,
Right.
and secondly, it is playing a very important role in terms of the
Right.
harbor and the
Yeah.
shellfish and so forth, and an increasingly important role. I have to ask you about the Sconset Beach program. The last time this whole thing came up, you were very much opposed to any efforts out there. You've changed your position.
I don't necessarily change my position. If you look back, you think you asked Pete Kaiser and myself this numerous times, or different people did, and we said we weren't opposed to trying to save the bank and the bluff and the road. We were opposed to beach nourishment, because what would it do to the habitat offshore?
You were
when that
opposed to
sand
really the
mitigates?
issue of where you were going to get the material from.
And how you were going to do it.
And how you-
If they had come in and we told them from day one, if you had come in and asked to armor this bluff, we would be 100% supportive, because that to us is the only way you're going to stabilize that bluff for any amount of time. I supported the Sconset Beach project that's there now, the geotubes, because one, I want to see what it does, and I think that it will buy the town the time it needs to come up with alternative access and figure out how we're going to move sewer and water and electrical and all this stuff, which by law we have to supply to the people on Baxter Road. And not so much the people on the water side, it's the other side of the road that becomes the issue, because there's only, in the stretch that they put the geotubes, there's only, I think, one house, maybe two.
Yeah, it's sort of, I'm not exactly sure where it ends. 'Cause I
It
haven't been out
ends
there.
before the three on the end. There's one little one there in the middle. So it's really because the road is so
It's
close there.
It's north of Helmut Weimar's house, right?
Yes,
It's
yes.
north of, what is it?
It starts, you know
88
where they used to back up and drop the sand.
Right.
It starts at about there.
Right.
I think it's 86 or 88, and then it goes up to where the road is the narrowest up there. It's 900 feet altogether. So, you know, the part that frustrates me is when I pick up the paper and I read an editorial or a comment from someone that's completely wrong, and then people read it and they assume that's the case.
Can you be specific?
No, I don't want to get too specific, but I'll be specific about what's wrong. The fact of the matter is that this is all being paid for by SBPF. It's not this section is not costing the town a penny. There's money escrowed for if they don't do what they're supposed to do, or it starts to cause adverse impacts. There's money escrowed to remove the project, not on the town's dime either. So this is a win-win for the town. It gives us time to go through the process of doing takings or getting easements, coming up with funding resources and all the necessary stuff we need to do to get everything moved to an alternative access if Baxter Road were to fail. But it doesn't cost us any money at the same time.
What do you view as the sort of the litmus test of whether this is working or not?
I think you're just going to have to watch it each storm and see. That my big concern is, does it cause any adverse effects? Because
Scouring
or down tide, down beach issues, And when I talked to the guys from the DEP about this, they said the same thing. They said, this is a perfect project for us to watch very carefully and see what geotubes do, because there really isn't a lot of experience in the Northeast with them. They're used pretty extensively in the South. They use them along the Jersey Shore and the Delaware Shore quite a bit. So we'll see. And I think they're going to work. I mean, I watched them in the last storm, and the project was only half done, but
and somebody said the difference with that storm was the ground was frozen and it was a very short, intense storm rather than
It's funny because I was there right at high tide during the height of the storm. And how I always gauge what happens out there is, years ago they did a jute koi bag system where they put 4x4s in front of them, and those posts now are out in the wash, and they 99% of the time you don't even see them; they're covered with sand. But in a storm event, they get exposed about 3 feet. During that storm, they were exposed. You could see the row of them in the surf break, and then the next day they were covered up again. So that sand that they're dumping up there on the top of these tubes is doing what it was designed to do.
That happens out in Matticat without the tubes too.
Exactly.
I mean, the foundations coming. The foundations.
I believe
go.
that erosion is going to be an issue in Nantucket in the next 25 to 50 years. There's no way around it, and we're going to start not only dealing with homes issues, but infrastructure issues. We've got the airport, the end of the runway at the airport at some point is going to become an issue. The sewer beds is going to become an issue. The end of Matticat Road, where Ames Street goes down to Smith's Point, I think it'll be an issue in the next 5 years. And that's my big concern right now. I'm watching that very closely. I believe that the only solution to these problems is going to be some continuing plans and pilot programs or whatever that involve private and public sector cooperation, whether the town, joint applications like we did here at Sankaty.
Would a ferry, just as an aside, would a ferry be a practical solution for Smith's Point?
I don't know.
Yeah.
We're going to, the question is, if Smith Point breaks free, what's it going to do to the creek if the end of the creek breaches there? I mean, what's that going to do to Matticat Harbor? What's it going to do to the ponds? Do we have to save that? But see, there's a perfect example where I believe beach nourishment would work. You could build that beach up by pumping sand in from offshore. You don't have the hard bottom structure that you had at Sankaty, and that was always my argument with the beach nourishment at Sankaty. Was you've got what is basically as close to a coral reef in New England as you get off of that beach. Is all big boulders and sponges and rock ledges. Everywhere else around the island, you just got rippled sand. So you could take sand from offshore in Matticat and pump it ashore there. I think that there's a lot of possibility in manipulating the littoral drift with offshore wave breaks. And there's a company, Joe Farrell has a company called Resolve Marine, and he has these steel barges that are just basically square boxes, and you pump them full of water and they sink to the bottom, and then they are able to, they act like a bar off a beach. And you've seen it in Matticat where one year there's a bar here and there's all the sand builds up in the beach, and next year that bar goes away, and guess what, that sand goes away. So you might be able to use these barges around the island out in the outer break to manipulate littoral drift to build sand up in different locations as it disappears. And then once you've built the sand up, you could pump the water out of this barge and move it somewhere else. So, I think
interesting. I ran into the guy who, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I ran into the guy from Woods Hole who's been doing the current study out there, and I just happened to meet up with him one night, and he said the current out there is actually circular.
Yep.
Which you may have known, I didn't know. And clearly that has an impact on how the wave action, the beach and the wave action respond to each other.
If you look at the shoal between Tuckernutt and Smith's Point, you can see it. It's like a horseshoe. It doesn't go straight down the beach. So, these kind of low impact solutions that are you've got to try them. And if they don't work, you remove them. If they do work, then you build on what does work. So,
do you think there's a will here in the community to do something like that?
I think there's a will in some parts of the community, and then there's a will to just let nature take its course in other parts of the community. So. One
last question.
Yep.
How do you respond to the comment that you have a conflict by working with Cottage and Castle? Who is the principal contractor for the geotube system?
Before I even went to work for Cottage and Castle, I filed a disclosure with the State Ethics Commission explaining what I was going to be doing. And to be very clear what I do for Cottage and Castle is I'm an independent contractor. I've been doing construction management on the island here for over 30 years. I am working on 7 different projects for Cottage and Castle right now, none of which have to do with Wisconsin Bluff, nothing to do with SPPF. These are all construction, home construction projects. I'm an independent contractor. I only work for them 4 months a year, 5 months a year, and
And you have a history of working for them?
I have a history of working with Jamie before,
Oh,
yes,
okay.
in the past. And they know my work, and I, you know, through I mentioned as architects and stuff that I was ready to start working on this, which I do every year. I go scalloping until January 1st, and then I do construction until May, till I go on the boat. And they had a lot of work, and they needed some help. So before I went to work for them, I cleared it with, I had town council write a letter to the State Ethics Commission explaining it, and the State Ethics Commission cleared me and said there was no conflict. When the selectman's position starts being a full-time paid position and I don't have to work, then I'll be glad to stand back and say, you know what, I'm not. I don't have a conflict. I don't believe I do, and anyone who knows me well enough to know that I'm not. Once I make my mind up about something, it's my decision. It's not swayed by what somebody else thinks. I mean, so if people have an issue with it, then they don't have to vote for me. If they don't, then vote for me. If I get reelected, great. If I don't, because of this, then good luck to the next guy.
Bob DeCosta, well, good luck with your run for
Thank you.
second
Thank you,
term,
Dan.
and I hope it works out for you.
Well, I hope so too.